around this time last year, I quit all forms of social media. Now, I don't intend on being that guy, you know, the one who talks about this sort of thing all the time. Oh, I went on a social media blackout. But I do have a reason for telling you that, so please do stick with me. I mean, I did it for all sorts of reasons, primarily so that I could have more space inside my head to see clearly on the things I need to do, and to see clearly the things I need to see. And honestly, it's something I suggest you all try, even if it's just for a moment. It is sort of a shame because, you know, the really great thing about Facebook is nothing. Nothing. There's literally nothing great about Facebook. Like, do you remember the old chain letters? Yeah. The tag 10 friends in this post to let them know you support our cause. That's half a heartbeat away from it. And you get to know who's likely to tag you in one of those things, and it just makes you want to avoid them just a little bit. Sorry if I'm offending you this morning. Or how about the fact that you get to see everything about everybody's life? Like, who really wants to know who's going what place and when and where? Or I know I sound so old right now, and you get to know what people have and what they're spending all their savings on. I mean, do you really need to know that? Also, you see people's opinions that you didn't know that they had. And now you're like, I guess I have to mute great Auntie Ethel for a while. Incidentally, the good people at Facebook also get to know all those things about you. So, personally, I don't think I'll be back. I mean, you know what? You do you, and there's no shade here, but amongst what I'm sure are the many, many, many advertised benefits of social media, here's what else comes with it. We all know too much. We all know too much. Don't you? I mean, you know what everybody else has, you know what everybody else owns, you get a good idea of what everybody else spends their money on. I mean, do you ever wonder how much money you would have saved if you didn't know what everybody else spent theirs on? Do you ever wonder how many times you would have avoided having to declutter your house if you didn't know what everyone else clutters their house with? Do you ever wonder how much you would have given away to people who've less than you have if you hadn't already seen how much the people who have more than you have had? Do you ever wonder? And if you haven't wondered, now you are. Or at least, I hope you are. Because you know what? This is where we all live. We all know too much, right? And all of it works to one purpose. And that's to draw us to more. We're in part 2 of this series. It's a 2-part series, so we're at the end of this thing that affects all of us. It affects every single one of us because of the media we consume, the messages we hear, and the people around us. It's this thing we are calling the draw to more. And while last week I talked about how we feel, this week I want to talk about something that we must do. And I promised you I'd get practical, and we will. And if you're not a Jesus follower, then I really need you to listen to this next part really closely. Because we're going to look at some things that Jesus said this morning as it relates to our personal finances. And if you're not a Christian, if you're not a follower of Jesus, then you are completely off the hook. Because if you're not following Jesus, then he's not your Lord and he's not exercising any authority over you. And I don't want you to think that I'm trying to get you to do something that you don't want to do. I have no authority over you either. But for those of you who are Christians, for those of you who are followers of Jesus, and I don't want to be insensitive, but we don't really get a choice about this because we already signed up. We got the t-shirt, we wave the flag, we are Jesus followers. So we don't get a choice about what Jesus has to say because that's what we do. And by the way, just to let you off the hook a little, most Christians don't do what Jesus asks us to do, what we're about to read together. But we should. We should, because the whole point of following Jesus is that we say, yes, now, what is it that you want me to do? So again, if you're not a Christian, I think the things that Jesus suggests are something you should do regardless, but you don't have to. And I think that wherever you're at, whether you're not a Jesus follower or maybe you're even part of another religion, I think that at the very least, you should always be interested in what Jesus has to say about a thing. You don't have to do it, but I would think that you would at least want to know. The last thing, it's just so interesting to me that two of the most difficult areas, two of the areas that people run aground so very often are linked either indirectly or directly to one or both of two things. One or both of two things, sex and money. And the interesting part is that the areas of New Testament teaching in today's culture, the things that Jesus and the apostles taught about, the areas that are most often ignored relate to, you guessed it, sex and money. You'll be relieved, perhaps, that I'm only talking about the latter today. And there may be something on the inside of you this morning that wants to rail against whatever it is that's coming. It's just like a reflex. And I understand that, particularly if you're not religious, particularly if you're not a Christian. Because if you're not a Christian, you're like, here's what I know about church. Here's what I know about church. It's this. The church is against sex, and the church just wants my money. The church is against sex, and the church just wants my money. And guys, that's kind of the reputation we've built. But here's the deal, and I know I said that I was only going to talk about the money part this morning, but here we are. We're here, so we may as well go all in. You need to know this, and maybe you didn't know this. God created sex. So any church that's embracing the teaching of Jesus, any church that's attempting to embrace the teaching of Jesus can't be against sex. Why? Because God created it. It was God's idea. He came up with it. And any church that's embracing the teachings of Jesus doesn't need your money. Any church that's following the leading of Jesus doesn't want your money, or at least it shouldn't. And here's why. Because Jesus doesn't want your money. God doesn't want your money. He doesn't need your money. In fact, God doesn't need anything from you. If God needed something from you, then he wouldn't be God. But he does want something for you as it relates to your money, as we're going to discover in just a little bit. Jesus wants something for you. And any good church that's trying to organize around the teachings of Jesus wants something for you as it relates to your money. They don't just want your money. So, here's the one thing I want for you this morning. During the next sort of half an hour we spend together, here's what I want for you. It's not just to stay out of debt. That's a good thing to do. And there are a lot of great programs that can help you in that regard. It's not about how to avoid bankruptcy, although that's a good thing to do as well. But this is not about that. This is about something much deeper. Because you can be completely out of debt, and you can have lots of money in the bank. You can have all your credit cards and personal loans paid off. You can have all your home loan done. You can have your HECS debt and HELP debt out of the way, all paid back. And according to Jesus, and this is why we need to pay attention, come on, according to Jesus, you can still be in a ditch financially. All those things could be true, and you could still be in a ditch financially, because Jesus, as he always does, goes right to the heart of the matter. One day he's teaching, and Jesus says this: no one can serve two masters. No one can serve two masters. No one, which means everyone, right? No one, Jesus says, can serve two masters. Now, this is one of those things that we find in the New Testament that we have trouble translating into our modern culture, because we're like, Jesus, hold up. What are you even talking about? Like, I don't even have one master. But Jesus is drawing his audience in, right? And in the middle of Roman occupation, his audience were acutely aware of what it meant to be mastered. More about that in just a second. He goes on and he says, talking about masters, he says this, either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. To which we kind of look at that, don't we? And we say, hate, love, devote, despise, master this. Jesus, what are you even talking about? First of all, there are some awfully big extremes there, which, well, honestly, Jesus, I have no idea how any of that relates to me. And there's a reason for that. Because when we hear this word master, we think of the word boss. We think, oh, master, that's like the boss, right? And immediately, if you're anything like most of us, we respond with this. Well, no one is the boss of me. I'm my own boss. But that's not quite what Jesus was talking about here. This was not a boss. This was more like an owner. Because that little Greek word, translated here as master, actually means one who is in charge of by virtue of possession or ownership. It's this idea of exclusivity. Like you can be only owned by one entity. You can only be possessed by one thing, one person, or one owner, one thing. And to which we say, okay, that's fine. That's really interesting. But again, David, that's got nothing to do with me, right? Besides, what we do is we expect Jesus to go on with his teaching and say something like this. You can only serve one master. It's either God or Satan. But Jesus doesn't say that because he's cleverer than that. He says no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. Again, that Greek word money can be translated to wealth or stuff. You cannot serve God and your wealth. You cannot serve God and your stuff. You can't serve both of them at the same time. And it underscores this very important point. And if you're a Christian, you have got to listen to this because this is actually mission critical to what Jesus asks us to do. Because for Jesus, the primary issue here is not to do with your money. It's not to do with wealth. It's not to do with stuff. As far as Jesus is concerned, the primary issue here is not money. The primary issue here when it comes to money for Jesus is mastery. The primary issue is who or what controls you. Who or what informs what you do, where you go. Who or what informs how you behave. The primary issue here is ownership. The primary issue Jesus wonders about, if you're a Christian, and if you're not a Christian, maybe you should consider this as well, is this. Do we have money or does money have us? Do we have money or does money have us? Do we own it or does it own us? Do we use it? Come on. Or does it use us? And the reason we need to watch what we do with our money and why it matters is because money and what money promises us. Money is the chief competitor for ownership over my heart. And it's the chief competitor for ownership over your heart. That is why you can be so good with your money and still be in danger. That's why you may pay your home loans off 10 years early and it still can wreck your life. That's why you may even teach the investment class or the getting out of credit card debt class and you can still be in trouble. Because his point is this: without settling this issue of ownership, you will be in danger.
Danger? Ha! I walk on the wild side. I laugh in the face of danger.
Lion King reference. But you know this. When you are left to be your own boss, you do whatever you want, how you want, whenever you want, which is great fun. It does leave you prone to one of two extremes. It leaves you prone to either the extreme of consuming or it leaves you prone to the extreme of hoarding, consuming or hoarding. When you do what you want, when you want, how you want, it leaves you prone to one of these two extremes. Consuming says this: I will use everything I get. It's unbridled desire. Upgrade, want, need. Upgrade, upgrade, upgrade. It's the reason why you have a perfectly good phone and you line up for the iPhone 12. It's the reason why the other day I drove a hybrid car, actually enjoyed it, and then I started Googling hybrid cars to see how much they cost, even though I have two perfectly good cars already. It's consumption. It's consume, 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 upgrade, upgrade, upgrade. That's consumption. It's unbridled desire. The other one, hoarding, is unbridled fear. Hoarding says this: I'm not going to have enough. What if I don't have enough? I better squirrel all the things away so I have enough. It's what we talked about last week. Consuming or hoarding. The cause of both of these extremes, the cause of both of these things is the same thing. And it's a word that I mentioned last week. And it's a word that caused like a visceral reaction in some of you, because it's a word that's tough to see in front of a mirror. And it's this word: greed. Greed. Now, like I said last week, no one thinks they're greedy. And like I said last week, greed is really easy to spot in other people. But to help us this morning, I actually want to define greed in a way that will help us remember, because greed has nothing to do what's in your bank account. It's got nothing to do with what's in your bank account and everything to do with what's in your heart. And honestly, if you're anything like me, sometimes looking into your heart can be a pretty confronting exercise. So, greed has nothing to do with how much you have. You know, I, like you, have met people who with very little who are greedy. And I've met people with not very much who are super generous. It's an attitude. No, actually, it's more than that. It's like a default setting. Greed is simply this, and this definition is certainly not original with me, but it's the one that's helped me wrestle this issue of greed the most, because it's easy to remember. It rhymes. I like things that rhyme. Greed is not necessarily even about how much we take. You know, we think of greed as take, 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 to take. It's not necessarily about how much we take. Greed is simply an assumption we make. Greed is this. Greed is the assumption that it's all for my consumption. Greed is the assumption that it's all for my consumption. Say it with me, would you, sitting in front of your computer or your phone? Greed is the assumption that it's all for my consumption. It's this. It's the assumption that if it's been placed into my hands, if I've been #blessed with a great job, a good wage, an amazing car, that it's all for me. Like if I make a good thing, if I sow a good crop, if I build a better life for me, then it's all for me. And it's all for mine. And if I should choose out of the goodness of my heart to give some, whether it's someone in need or if I move to give to my local church, then I hope God is watching, right? Like I'll give nice and slowly as the bucket passes to make sure that God knows what I did. That's what makes these two extremes so dangerous. These two extremes, consuming and hoarding. Because the thing that they have in common is that they are both all about me. Consumption says, I'll spend my money now. Hoarding says, I'll spend my money later. Spend now, spend later. It's all about me. Oh, and by the way, you don't actually have to have extra. You don't actually have to have extra to be greedy. As long as you're planning to spend whatever comes your way, then you're a candidate. It's the assumption that it's all for my consumption. And if you've allowed your lifestyle to keep pace or to outpace your income, you will find it next to impossible to keep greed from taking root in your heart. There's nothing wrong with that. Except if you're a Christian. If you're a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, and you just then decide to live this way, and when I, as a Christian, decide to live this way, then it's a problem. And here's why. Because when we live this way, we've started living as if there's no God. We've started living as if this life is all there is to life. But then trouble comes. Financial trouble comes, because it always does, right? Particularly as it relates to your finances, whether it's financial trouble of your own making, like it could be a credit card debt or a bad business deal, or whether it's something that's beyond your control, like say someone did something to you, or I don't know, just pick an example out of the air, like there was a global pandemic, you get in trouble. And what's the first thing you do? You pray, right? And I love what Nicky Gumbel says. Nicky Gumbel, the pioneer of Alpha, says something along the lines of, at some point, we all pray, whether you're a Christian or not. At some point, we all pray. It's just a matter of when. And I think there's some truth to that. You may not even be a Christian, but oftentimes, the times you are most inclined to pray are when something goes wrong. And when something goes wrong with your finances and you pray, God, would you help me? God, would you help me? What you're really praying is this. You're saying, God, I would like to invite you into my finances. But what you're actually saying is, God, I chose the wrong master. Like I was in charge, but it didn't work out. Now, can you help me? My question to you is this. If you think you would invite God in when there's a problem, when you're in trouble, why wouldn't you invite him in now? To be the master now. Why not? You cannot serve both God and money. You cannot be mastered by both at the same time. You can't be mastered by them both at the same time. Here's what it looks like to be mastered by money, and why I keep saying that it's the order that matters. I said it last week and I said I would come back to it. It's the order that matters. If you're mastered by money, then you live your life in this order. Firstly, you live, you save, and you give. It goes in this order. If you're mastered by money, that is, you pay everything, you use whatever you have in your bank account now to deal with whatever things you have to deal with now. And then if you have just like a little bit left over, then you might put it away. You put it away in maybe your super or like a term deposit or a bank account. You put it away to spend later. And then, if there's anything left over after that, and if you see someone in need, or maybe if you come across a charity or a cause that moves you, then maybe you might think about giving it away. There's a lot of ifs there. More simply put, it's me first, me second, others, everybody else third. Me, others, including the church. And this is what we're talking about. When you live this way, you are living as if there's no more to life than this life. But if you are in charge of your money, if you have money and money doesn't have you, then this is what it looks like. If you are in charge of your money, mastering your money, you flip the script. You reverse the order. It's give, save, live. That is, you think of others first, yourself later, and then yourself now. See, the point is this, all of those three things are important, but it's about the order. The order is important. Here's why. If your money is spoken for before your wage goes into the bank, then greed has an all-access pass to your heart, because any extra that comes in is already spoken for as well. You are planning ahead of time to consume it. It's the assumption that it's all for my consumption. But if you can create some margin financially by reversing the order, by mastering your money, by being in charge of your money instead of letting it master you, then when the pressure is on, you get to make a choice. It gives you the opportunity to think of someone other than you first. And that could be a stranger. It could be a different you. It might even be the you beside you that you can think of first. Now, whether you're a Christian or not, whether you ever give a cent to this church, you do this and you'll thank me. Reverse the order and you'll thank me. Because this is so, so important. And this isn't about me or a specific local church. Now, I want you to know this. Pastors hate talking about this because we don't want you to think that this is about getting at your money. And so I wanted to show you, I was thinking like, how can I show you that this is not about the church getting your money? At home, we have these jars. Well, my oldest daughter has these jars. One, I should have actually taken a picture of the actual jars, but anyway, one is a big label on it that says God money, one is savings and one's spending. This represents her savings and her spending. And we've said to her, everything you get, every dollar you get, gets split up into these jars. And we break it down into little money, 10, 10, 80, right? And the live jar, where is it? The live jar, the spending jar will go up and down, and the God money jar will go up and down, and this one will slowly go up over time. It's really cool. Why are we teaching her that? Is it because I think that the church needs the 5 cents that she gives? No. Is it because God needs the 5 cents that she gives? Not at all. It's because I don't want our kids to be mastered by money. And I don't want you to be mastered by money either. And see, when you reverse the order, it gives you a very specific type of freedom. In fact, it's the very key to financial independence. It's independence from this mindset that your life is your stuff. Let me tell you, your life is not your stuff. When we get caught up in this idea that life is our stuff, do you know what drives us then? It's our appetite. It's the draw to more, our appetite. Our appetites are never, ever satisfied. That's the very nature of an appetite. And when you are driven by your appetite, unhealthy things happen. Your life is not your stuff. And let's be honest for a second here. 99% of you, it could even be 100, but I'll be generous and say 99% of you are going to run out of time before you run out of stuff. Life is not your stuff. Life is not your stuff. Life is your time. And so why would you let your stuff control your life? Reverse the order and you'll gain financial independence. You get independence from the idea, real financial independence, independence from the idea that life is your stuff, independence from a lifestyle that relegates God to break glass in case of emergency, independence from a life independent of God. To finish up this morning, I want to draw one last thought out of another story that Jesus told. It's a story that I was going to base this whole message around today because it's so rich. So please forgive me for skipping over a bunch of it. And I know we're running out of time. But Jesus is teaching one day and he says this: the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, this guy, what shall I do? I've no place to store my crops. If you realize you come to a place where you realize that you have more than you need, then that's a question you should ask from time to time. It's a question we should all ask ourselves from time to time. What he's really asking himself is, why do I have so much? And it's a particularly illuminating question. If you're wondering today, if you're watching this and you're wondering, am I mastering my money or am I mastered by money? Am I mastering my money or am I mastered by money? He goes on and says, then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. And there I will store my surplus grain. So said every financial planner. What a good plan. Store what you don't need now. Why would you do that? Well, what's the motivation? Why would you store those things? And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many of years. Take life easy. There's the motivation. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. In other words, who's he putting first? Himself, right? And he does exactly what many of us would do if we hit a windfall. And it makes sense. It makes sense if you think all there is to life is this life. Because it makes sense to secure your financial future because it's all about you. This is a picture of a man who's mastered by his wealth, who's mastered by his stuff. He has more than he needs, so he's already taken care of his needs. The next thing for him to do, he thinks, is to take care of his future needs. Him, not even thinking about anyone else at this point. And that's something for all of us suffer from, the propensity to just build a bigger barn. Because we think saving is the good thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. It's the wise thing to do. And if you get the order right, you're right, it is. But when you don't get the order right, God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?" The implication is, not you. Not you, right? Because there's something more to this life than this life. And so to be driven by your appetites and to be fueled by things that are all for my consumption, well, this is how it'll be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. In other words, when you live like there is no God, you live foolishly. And just like on a surface level, I would hate for God to call me a fool. But more to the point, how can I be rich toward God? What a great term. How can I be rich toward God? Because he is the one who really matters, right? Well, that's simple. He tells you, don't be mastered by your money. And you're rich towards God when you value what he values. You're rich toward God when you value the principles of the king. And this king, our king, is a king who is an others first king. He's a king who runs an others first kingdom. And he wants us to live an others first life. And so I want to encourage you this morning to take a look at your personal finances. And when you do, just simply reverse the order. Give, save, live. In that order. Give, save, live. Because that is how you gain true financial independence. And that is how you have money without money having you. Let me pray for you. Father God, I pray this morning for those of us who need our budget adjusting. Lord, those of us who've been challenged by this message today. Lord, there are some of us who need our lifestyle being reduced. There are some of us who will have to face some really hard realities. There are some of us who will have to take a longer term view and recognize that there is more to life than this life. I thank you that you don't leave us alone. You sent your Holy Spirit to help us with these very things. I pray that you would touch our heart, you would help us to make the hard choice and the wise choice, that we would have that level of financial freedom, that independence from God. Lord, that you would help us. You would help us. You would steel us and you would give us strength for it. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for joining us for Church at Home this morning. It has been a real treat to just spend these couple of moments with you. We would love to invite you back next week. Pastor Pam Busby is going to be speaking and sharing a message that I'm sure will thrill your hearts, as it always does. But until then, we've got some discussion questions that are about to appear in just a moment that will help you take a next step, particularly in regard to this topic. Around personal finances. Maybe if you're in a small group, maybe you want to send a screenshot of this, the discussion questions to them and just like have a text conversation or give them a call or just, take this a next step further because we are not just consumers of content, but we are contributors to our own spiritual growth. And so we would love for you to do that, and we'd love for you to join us next week as we join together for church at home and also for church in person. We will see you then. God bless you.